First off, I got fired from every job I ever had. I was only 24 and I was a kid doing everything by the seat of my pants. I went bankrupt, so I had no debt. And I figured out a way to open a comedy club. And about 3 months later, I opened up Laughs Unlimited All Comedy Showroom, which was at the time, Priscilla, the 12th full-time comedy club in the United States. That's how rare it was at the time. And I went back down to LA and hooked up with Dave Coulier, who introduced me to Bob Saget, who introduced me to Gary Shandling, who introduced me to Jerry Seinfeld, who introduced me to Harry Anderson. Once you got in that world, you started meeting all these entertainers that you have to remember, Priscilla, they weren't famous at the time. They were young and still trying to make their way. Sometimes it's just luck and timing. If you're ready and when the opportunity comes, grabbing that opportunity and making it work for your career and your future.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Kitchen. Today I've got Scott Edwards here with me. He has been on the fringe of showbiz for over 40 years. And Scott, you were asking, why do I have you here? I have you here for a reason, because you are creativity, risk-taking, branding, longevity, and you're going to teach us about the business of being funny.
You know why she's saying that, ladies and gentlemen, is because she has had such incredible, rich, famous marketing gurus. I'm like wondering what the hell I'm doing here, but we'll have some fun. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Scott Edwards. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Down and back. Take a seat. Relax. Priscilla's the star. It's her show. Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Kitchen.
That's why I have you here. You brought the factor of funny, and I'm so excited about that. Scott, how did all this happen? You've done a lot of things with a lot of big names, Jerry Seinfeld, Jay Leno, and been around really funny people. How do you work with the really funny people? I can imagine everything is a joke, and at some point you got to get down to the business.
Let me explain first off to the audience so they don't have any preconceived ideas. I am not a comic. I have done thousands of hours of stage time. Some people think I'm funny, but my main goal as an entrepreneur was I was a producer. And as a producer, I had a chain of comedy clubs, so I produced literally thousands of stage shows. I did also produce 4 or 5 large sold-out concerts. That doesn't count the ones out in the park. One of those, we had 15,000 people. It was incredible. And I also produced 3 TV series. So all about stand-up comedy. And my podcast, Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC, was based on those relationships that I built as an entrepreneur, producer of stand-up comedy entertainment.
How did you land on being a producer? Because that's something I'm thinking someone wouldn't just immediately think, oh, I want to be a producer. Or maybe they would.
If you don't mind a little segue, I want to explain why I'm an entrepreneur. First off, I got fired from every job I ever had. Yeah. But the reality is I started my first company when I was 17. It was a small construction company. And then when I was 19, I had a small DJ portable music company. And when I was about 23 years old, I was selling life insurance, business to business, door to door, trying to make a living. And when you're 24, you have no interest in life insurance. So I wasn't really happy. I was successful and good at it, but I didn't enjoy it. And my father, who had a great sense of humor, I was down in LA with my then girlfriend, soon to be wife, soon to be ex-wife. And we visited this satellite comedy club called the Comedy Store, but this was a small one in Westwood, just next to UCLA University. And I go in, and stand-up comedy was not a mainstream entertainment at the time. There was very few clubs in the country. And I saw Sandra Bernhard, George Wallace, and I saw and met Dave Coulier. You guys all know Dave Coulier from Full House and Fuller House and America's Funniest Videos. He's done all kinds of stuff, cartoon voices. Dave is a very successful entertainer. But I met him, and I had such a good time that I'd already started a couple other small businesses. So on my road trip back to Sacramento, this was down in LA, in my mind, I quit, and then I ended up doing this, Priscilla. I quit my job. I went bankrupt, so I had no debt. And I figured out a way to open a comedy club. And about 3 months later, I opened up Laughs Unlimited All Comedy Showroom, which was at the time, Priscilla, the 12th full-time comedy club in the United States. That's how rare it was at the time. And I went back down to LA and hooked up with Dave Coulier, who introduced me to Bob Saget, who introduced me to Gary Shandling, who introduced me to Jerry Seinfeld, who introduced me to Harry Anderson. Once you got in that world, you started meeting all these entertainers that you have to remember, Priscilla, they weren't famous at the time. They were young and still trying to make their way. For example, Jay Leno worked for me many times on my small clubs and a couple concerts well before he got the Tonight Show. Jerry Seinfeld was working for me when he got his sitcom, Seinfeld. In fact, he had to cancel a week when he got the show, and he's such a cool guy. A year later, after the show had been out, he calls me up and he goes, "Hey, I owe you a week." And he came back and worked for the same money I originally contracted him for. That's unheard of in business. He's such a straight up guy. But having a comedy club, one of only 12 in the whole country, all these young comics needed stage time, needed somewhere to build their acts, to maybe get a TV show or get on to a cable network or something. And my club was that stepping stone.
Wow.
Kind of covers everything.
Talk about timing. Talk about getting into the circle. You had something they needed and building relationships. I'm interested to know, you meet all these guys prior to them being famous. I'm thinking about the business. You started this comedy club. You started from scratch. You've gone bankrupt, no debt. You're like, okay, you're going to make this work. What was the mentality at that point? And what are you looking at to make this business successful?
I was only 24, and I was a kid doing everything by the seat of my pants. I never went to college. All the companies I started, and by the end of my career, which I just recently retired, I'd started over 20 companies. This particular one built up to a chain of 3 comedy clubs and had a chance to work with everybody from Soupy Sales and Graham Chapman for the older audience to Robin Williams and Dana Carvey. So there was all these young people coming through the club. But exact, Priscilla, to what you're saying, I was working with these really talented people, but I was the producer. I was the business side. So my job was to get them stage time, and I paid them to entertain my audiences, but I had to bring audiences into the club. I had to sell them food, sell them drinks, and make enough money so that I could pay the comics so they could learn their trade. So a lot of business is involved. In fact, if anybody out there is thinking of opening a comedy club, be careful, because it's not just a showroom or theater. When you open a comedy club, you also have to have a bar, so you have to understand the liquor world. And you have to sell food, so you have to run a restaurant, right? So it's all these things combined that create this entrepreneurial world of a club ownership in this particular business.
It's so many elements. You often think of just the funny. You don't think of what has to make the environment and what has to make people want to come. And someone has got to create all that fast-paced business. Because I'm thinking every night is a night where you have to drive those numbers. It's unlike some of the businesses where maybe you sell a subscription or you sell a course. Every night you must sell the numbers.
It's about marketing, and you have had a lot of marketing gurus. I know Nate, the pastor, who's also a marketing guru, was talking about you have to sell results. In my case, I was selling to my audience here in Northern California. If you trust me and you come and pay $5 or $10 at the door, remember this was many decades ago, I will promise you a 2-hour show that you won't forget. And I had to build that trust with the audience that if they gave me some of their money, I would provide entertainment that would help them forget their bills, forget their problems, and have a good hour and a half, 2-hour of entertainment. So that's the salesmanship. You have to put that together with selling the food and the drinks. You're selling an idea that, hey, if you trust me and come into my business, I will entertain you. And some comics don't do well and bomb. And so that was the risk. I had to make sure I booked comics, and I also did jugglers and magicians and ventriloquists and impressionists. But whatever the art form, I had to make sure they were funny enough to entertain my audience.
I love that you spoke to what you were selling. This is a night you get to forget about your problems. That was the promise. I'm excited to dive into this, Scott. You talked about Jerry, that he's really a stand-up guy Who would you say is memorable or someone that you think was very talented that maybe people didn't get to know about?
I could name drop for hours, but
Yeah.
Priscilla, I think what you're saying is that I did have Jay Leno and Jerry Seinfeld and Dana Carvey and Harry Anderson and many Robin Williams, many of the people that are famous now.
Yeah.
But those are the 1% that become rich and famous. I actually worked with thousands and definitely hundreds of very talented people that no one's ever heard of. Steve Bruner, one of the funniest, cleanest comics in America, Don Friesen, Mike Lucas. You've not heard of any of these people, but they put together a really good show. And that's the important part. And what I had to do is use my ability to and my taste and humor to build the shows to bring an audience in. And I'll give you an example. One of your guests, Raul West, was talking about don't sell the product, sell yourself. And as the club owner, not only was my face in a lot of the advertising and on the TV commercials, it's so funny. I did 2 TV commercials with Bob Saget. One, he hit me with a car, and another one, he threw me off a building. They were loads of fun. But she said, don't sell the product, sell yourself. And so I always worked the door. So I greeted the customers they came in. And more importantly, Priscilla, I was the MC. So before they saw these famous and not so famous comics, they saw me on stage each and every night. And so there was that connection with my customers and my audience where they built up a trust in me that I was going to bring them quality entertainment.
I'm interested, Scott, that, like you said, you've worked with the people whose careers just took off and then people whose careers didn't take off. For the person who they want to be an entertainer, entrepreneur, what would you say? I think talent-wise, as you just pointed out, they were equally as talented or even more talented. What was the thing that sort of made someone shoot up?
Well, a lot like life, sometimes it's just luck and timing. When I opened my comedy club, it was literally months, maybe a year before the huge explosion of stand-up comedy. We went from 12 clubs in the country in 1980 to literally over 1,000 clubs in the country by 1985. So comedy entertainment really took off, and I was able to ride that wave. So timing is important. For comics, sometimes it's just the flip of a coin. For example, I was working a young, talented comic, musician, impressionist, and his name's Dana Carvey. Most people know him as the church lady from Saturday Night Live, and he had 2 movies. But he worked for me a lot, and we were literally sitting in a hot tub, and he was explaining to me, I just got a phone call from Lorne Michaels, and he wants me in New York on Monday to showcase for Saturday Night Live. So he was working my club as just one of the regular acts. He gets this phone call from Lorne Michaels. That Monday, he goes to New York. He gets the job on Saturday Night Live. He ends up on Saturday Night Live for, I think, 3 seasons. He did Hans and Franz. He did the church lady. He did a lot of great characters. He did a Bush impression. Very successful on Saturday Night Live. And that led to other TV specials. And he actually had a couple movies he starred in. But it just happened, right? He was at the right place at the right time. He was ready when Lorne Michaels called. He had the material to meet the needs of a really tough show like Saturday Night Live. For example, Gary Shandling, you guys should Google this, Gary Shandling, he was in hundreds of movies, many TV specials, had his own TV show called The Larry Sanders Show, very successful comic. But he was just a normal everyday comic, got his shot on the Johnny Carson show, The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and did so well that literally overnight his career was made. But there's been other comics that did The Tonight Show, and you never heard from them again. So it just depends on if you're ready and when the opportunity comes, grabbing that opportunity and making it work for your career and your future.
Thank you for that. Sometimes it just seems like this mystical thing, but I get it. It was about skill, honing your craft, being visible, and then when the opportunity comes, you're ready. And the rest is a factor of luck, a factor of God intervening.
Let me reiterate to everybody listening that you hear the term in show business, an overnight success. That is a fallacy. It is not true. Everybody from actors and singers and comics If you see them making it on TV or in the movies, they literally spent years in the trenches learning their craft, writing their material, getting up on stage over and over to become as good as they are. Lady Gaga didn't just start singing and get an album, right? She was working bars and nightclubs like everybody else, learning her skills.
Thank you for saying that. I'm interested in what you're doing today. And
Right now, I'm talking to you. It's Priscilla and the Entrepreneurial Kitchen. Yay, Entrepreneur's Kitchen. Anyway, we're here. Hey, everybody, we having a good time over there? Okay, good. I wanted to make sure the kids were having fun.
thank you for that. I can feel that your audience was always taken care of. Sometimes we forget those elements. You were also asking why I had you here. The other thing is I read a lot of work from Jay Abraham, and he talks a lot about pulling things from other industries that are not your industry, learning from the way you took care of your audience and applying that to business, looking at the way you interacted with young talent that was talented but not yet famous and how you worked with them. A lot of these things people can use in their businesses. I'm interested to know for you, what was the biggest entrepreneurial success and what was the biggest failure or lesson?
Another rule of being an entrepreneur is that be ready to fail. Failures are the stepping stones to success, and it takes time, much like an entertainer honing and writing their act over and over, or a singer practicing and rehearsing a song over and over. As an entrepreneur, you try different things, you put your heart into it, you work hard. Some things have great success and some things fail. But it's always important to learn something. In fact, you had Dr. Dave Jones on, and he was talking about there's always room to learn something and to be patient. And if you're learning from each process, each entrepreneurial trip you take, you're going to be that much stronger down the road. Now, to answer your question, I must say that my biggest success was that chain of comedy clubs, because I made so much money and had such great timing that with the money from that, I opened up a couple restaurants, I had a couple of art galleries, I did a lot of adventures. But one of my biggest failures is I owned a submarine. I had a company, some friends that called me up and said, hey, can you come over to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and help us launch this tourist submarine? I said, sure, I'm always there to help a friend. So I flew over and I'm helping them launch this. It seats about 45 people, tourist submarine, take them out, show them the fish and stuff. And I said, I got to have one of these. And so they built me a submarine. I launched it in Monterey, California. People could see the pelagic fish and the kelp forest and the sea otters and the sea lions. It was an amazing experience. I got to drive the boat, not with anybody on it. You have to be licensed for that. But I owned a submarine. Now, here's the interesting part. I put it in Monterey, a cold water environment. Now, I should say there's about 6 of these submarines around the world, but they're always in warm water. I put mine in cold water, and here's the bad part. In a cold water environment, you have a thing called algae bloom that would block the windows so that people couldn't see the fish and the sea otters. And so we had to pay a scuba diver to go with the submarine and keep the windows clean, right? It's crazy. Long story short, Priscilla, I lost my butt. It was a huge financial disaster. I went bankrupt off it. One of the 2 times I went bankrupt, lost lots and lots of money. The bad news is I lost lots and lots of money. The good news is I had a great time, had lots of fun, and I learned something from that experiment.
It does sound like a lot of fun. I'll say
It
that.
really,
Yeah. I wouldn't have known about the cold water and the hot water.
why would you? The thing is that, like, whenever you're going to go start a business, do your research. And I always do research into my various businesses. But in this case, I failed to look into the water environment. I was just so excited. I knew the tourist submarine would work. I knew there were tourists that wanted to go on it. It was successful in Monterey in the sense that people wanted to go on it, but the cost overrode the success. But it was always important to research and get experience from people already doing the job or business you want to go into. And people are very proud of what they do. When I opened my first small construction company, it was a striping company. I was 17 years old. I knew nothing. So I looked up in the yellow pages, for those before the computer, that's how you found things. The largest striping contractor in Sacramento, Northern California. And I went and I introduced myself to the owner, and he knew I was no threat. He told me where to get the paint, where to get the equipment, how much to charge, and he told me all the good things and the bad things about being in that business. And I took that, I borrowed his knowledge, and I went and opened my own company. There's no reason to recreate the wheel, right, Priscilla?
Very important. Tell me, how do you build a brand around something like laughter? Because I think a lot of people have got services, things that are intangible, and they're struggling really to carve out that space in the client's mind.
I will tell everybody listening to your podcast, Priscilla, that it is a lot easier today because there's things like the internet and social media where you can build a community, build a following, and educate people without them actually spending any money. However, back in 1980, yes, I'm old, when I opened my comedy club the very first time, remember, there weren't any other comedy clubs in Northern California. So I was doing a brand new, almost experimental entertainment. How did I convince people to come and spend money? In those days, you could do TV commercials and radio commercials. They don't have much power these days, but back then they were very powerful marketing tools. However, they were very expensive. So I went old school. I would have posters in the windows of my club saying these entertainers are coming and they've been on this TV show and why they're funny and you need to come see them. And then I would do flyers and I would walk around and put them in gas stations and at the bank and at retail stores that people could pick up and read about the shows. And then, of course, seeing people, I always carried some free tickets or 2-for-1 tickets, and I always invited people, hey, you ever heard of stand-up comedy? No, I've heard of Soupy Sales or somebody on TV, but I've never seen it. And I go, come check it out. It's really cool. So I became part of that branding. As I mentioned earlier, you want to sell yourself, and went out to the public and said, I've got this new entertainment format. You need to come check it out. Now, later on in my life, I ended up owning a travel agency, a medium-sized insurance agency. I told you about the submarine. I had a beach shack in Hawaii for 5 years. All these different adventures, you had to find the best way to market them and connect with people. You have to connect with your future customers and engage them in wanting to participate in what you're offering. So whether I was selling comedy or cocktails or insurance, you still have to reach the people and then meet their needs. So in comedy, it was, hey, we need some entertainment and forget our problems. In insurance, you're selling them something to give them peace of mind and help them sleep at night by solving their problems with insurance. Does that make sense, kind of, Priscilla?
Yeah, it makes sense, Scott, for you, because I get the sense that, yes, you were a very good marketer and you were someone who was looking for adventure. You were not afraid to take a few risks. You're not afraid to lose it all and start again and have a smile on your face and laughter still after that. What do you think, looking back, was the thing that you would say, if you have this one thing that cuts through all the different businesses and the way you've navigated through setbacks and successes and everything in between?
I touched on it a little bit, Priscilla. I think with any entrepreneur, much all your various guests, it's so important to connect with people. And I think one of the things we're losing in this day and age, and I'm sorry, that's an old person's point of view, is that everyone's got their face in a phone. Everyone's texting and everyone's maybe doing a cell phone call. But to be honest, if you really want to connect with people, you have to not be afraid to meet them and then ask them the right questions and then shut up and listen. Listen to their needs, their problems, or what they're trying to about them. And then you use that information to solve their problems. So with construction, it was, hey, we needed lines in our parking lot. What are you going to do to help us? With the comedy, it was, hey, we need a break from our life. What can you do to give us an hour and a half, 2 hours of free time in our brains? When it was insurance or travel sales, hey, what are you trying to achieve? How much money do you have? How can I help you take care of your needs? And I think that it comes down to answer your question, Priscilla, communicating and connecting with people, right? You have to really engage, kind of like we are. One of the things I love about being a podcaster is that you're putting out information, you're putting out content that people from here to Australia, to Russia, to Africa get a chance to hear and may catch them, may engage with them. Priscilla, you're having lots of success because it's a wonderful podcast. Yay! That's enough of that. But anyway, my point is that it's because you're connecting with your listeners.
Very important. Sometimes we forget in this digital age, and I like you talked about this was pre-internet, the way you were marketing, but I'm telling you that would work today where everyone is rushing to the internet. It would be nice to be given a flyer and some free tickets somewhere. It would be so different that the impression you would make with the person.
It's interesting you say that, Priscilla, because I talk to young entrepreneurs and they're all wanting to learn coding and they want to take a class on how best to reach people through the internet. And I go, okay, there's a place for that. And a lot of that is free marketing, and I'm a big fan of it and I use it myself. But if you really want to connect, go old school, right? Talk to people face to face, maybe pass out some flyers. I talked to somebody who wanted to open up a bookstore the other day. And I said, first off, go talk to other bookstore owners, find out the good things and the bad things, and then what books sell. And then once you open your bookstore, make sure you find that audience that reads those books and make sure they know about you. And back in my day, it was through the yellow pages or maybe a classified ad in the newspaper, a display ad in the newspaper. But nobody looks at a newspaper anymore and nobody has yellow pages anymore. So that's where the internet and social media come in. That doesn't mean you have to pass over things like flyers and going out and meeting with people. Another example is when I had the travel agency, I would get small groups of people together and do a little seminar. Now, these days, webinars are a big thing. But back in the 80s and 90s, if you got 10 or 20 people in a room and you got 15, 20 minutes at a time to talk about travel or talk about artwork or whatever I was dealing with at the time, and in finding out what was important to them and sharing your knowledge with them builds up your resume, right? I look like I know what I'm talking about. I had them all fooled.
I'm sure they had a great time being fooled as well.
Yeah, it's okay if you don't learn anything as long as you have a good time.
In the world of the digital age, people are scrolling. Most of the time, it's just for entertainment and just to have that feel-good moment. So people are still really longing for that.
And you see it all the time because people like you and I do these half-hour-long podcasts where we interview people and we get a little deeper and we get some more information, in my case, some more entertainment. But a lot of the audience likes 30-second and 60-second reels, right? So we have to use the reels, kind of like an old TV commercial, to grab someone's attention and say, hey, if you want to hear about being an entrepreneur, come listen to the Entrepreneur's Kitchen, right? For me, hey, you like this 30 seconds of comedy, maybe you should listen to my half-hour-long podcast. So there's still tools to engage with the audience.
It's understanding why you're doing it before you just do it.
For your case, you're doing faith, family, and business. So those are three very important things. For me, I might be family first, then faith, and then business. Family's so key to have that ground, that foundation for your life. But faith is so important. As an entrepreneur, all the entrepreneurs know out there that we constantly have to take a leap of faith, right? Now, most times we're believing in ourselves, but even in believing in ourselves, we have to hope and pray there's somebody watching over us, right? And then when it comes to business, you can't do it half-assed. You got to work at it. It takes hard work. You got to research and you got to give it time. I think it was Dr. Jones that said, you got to be patient, work hard at it. It'll come to you, but it might take you longer than it took somebody else. You don't know. Don't give up.
Yes, absolutely. Scott, please tell me what's exciting you about the future, about your industry, about the future of comedy.
I got to tell you, Priscilla, I am so excited. You know why? I'm retired. So I've gotten to the age where all the companies I've started, I built them up and sold them and put some money in the bank, and now I'm happily retired. However, I miss the people. And so about 6 years ago, I started my stand-up comedy podcast, Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC, where I share comedy from the 80s and 90s, and I interview old staff people, comics, agents, brokers, club owners, everybody from the industry. And that's helped me stay in touch with the people I love working with. But I will tell you something exciting, Priscilla. You're doing it now. The new age of podcasting is video podcasting, right?
Yes.
I've always been an audio podcaster. Just a few months ago, I launched a brand new podcast called the Tag Team Talent Podcast. It's called that because it's me and a co-host. Tag Team Talent Podcast, and we showcase 3-minute videos of talent from all over the world. In fact, this week we have a dance troupe from Indonesia, we have a guitarist from Idaho, and a comic from LA. So every week is something different, but it's all video podcasting. It's a whole new scary world. What am I going to do, Priscilla?
That sounds exciting. I love the honoring the relationships you've had. And still, that hard to have talented people and give them a platform to be found and to be discovered.
We're not just doing comedy. We're letting singers and dancers and musicians and impressionists and jugglers from all around the world getting their few minutes of international exposure. And if anybody in your audience has a talent, if you go to the website, tagteamtalentsearch.com, that's tagteamtalentsearch.com, you'll find a way to share your video and your talent with us. And if you do, we'll put it out there for the world to see.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott. Please, to the audience, you've been told where to go, tagteamtalentsearch.com. Scott, if they want to know a little bit more about you, I guess they can follow you on the podcast. And the podcast is called, remind me.
Stand-up comedy, your host and MC.
Wonderful.
So there's the audio podcast, and then Tag Team Talent Podcast is the video one. And then if you want it all, there is a podcast network. I don't know if you've joined a network yet, but I formed a comedy podcast network that presents about 15 different podcasts by comics. There's comedy blogs by different entertainers. There's some videos. There's an online comedy course, some great pictures. And that's the Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network, Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network.com. And it's a free app on all Apple phones, and it's a lot of stuff to keep me busy. Did I mention I'm retired?
I was just about to tell you that. Are you sure you're retired?
Yes, my wife keeps saying, you're doing it wrong.
You know what? If it's bringing you a lot of joy and you're helping a lot of people, that makes it worth it. So
Yes, it does. And I'm so happy to have this opportunity with you, Priscilla. And The Entrepreneur's Kitchen is an amazing podcast. You have had really smart, talented guests, and then you had me. So everybody tell your friends and have them come listen, because Priscilla's doing an amazing job from Sydney, Australia, which is, it's incredible how we can touch the world, isn't it?
No, absolutely. Thank you for honoring me with your time, and you've been a great guest. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you, Priscilla.